That's right. Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
And tonight we are talking about a really big milestone, especially for me personally. It's American Graffiti, the 50th anniversary. Dragon, I'm not going to be subtle about this at all. Did you know that American Graffiti's cruising scenes were shot in my town?
Get out of town.
Like I haven't brought it up a million times before.
You know.
Okay, so we're gonna break it all down. Dragon, I've definitely got some background. I have one story in particular from my grandpa about a chance encounter with the production. So I don't know if you want me to do that during background or during like our initial thesis statements or what.
Well, does it? Well, is it? Is it a background? Is it about the making of the movie?
It is about the making of the movie tangentially.
Well, make a judgment call, man. Pick where you
Okay,
want it.
I'll tie it to like when we talk about the filming. Okay. So Dragon, I'll leave you to kick it off because obviously for me I'm just going to be like when I watch this movie it's like the heart of my town and I love it. You know, I have a very personal connection to it, but as someone who does not have that rooting interest, what are your thoughts on this? Because it is impossible for me to. I just can't do it. As many times as I watch this movie, it's impossible for me to separate it from my hometown.
Yeah. So American Graffiti. Obviously, George Lucas's first big film after THX 1138. After it goes from short film to they does essentially kind of a feature length of that. This was essentially. And this is practically made on a dare, this movie.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Which is so funny to me how that works. This was my first introduction to I think my first introduction to this was that little brief moment in Empire Dreams.
Oh, sure.
I think here's the thing. Technically, it's been a while since I meant to look into this beforehand, but I forgot to. I think technically my first tangential encounter with American Graffiti was Mel's Drive-In at Universal Studios, or at least the mock-up of Mel's Drive-In. There's a drive-in there. I think it's Mel's. I don't
Yes, it is a
know.
Mel's Drive-In.
Then
Yes.
yes, that's what there's definitely so that. Technically, that was probably my first introduction, and then Empire Dreams.
That
So
makes sense. Yeah.
Empire Dreams pretty much gave context to the prior. So anyway, yeah, I mean, American Graffiti. I look at this movie. There's a lot of. See, this is very much. This movie was of my father's era, so it really shaped that deck. 62 really shaped who he was. And I don't really know how he thinks about this movie. I'm sure he's seen it, and I'm sure he loved it because basically his experience growing up is in, mind you, not in California, but barring that aspect of it, that culture, a lot of that's like the car culture and everything. That's very much who he is in the music and everything. So there's a lot of like the same way it's Peter Quill and his and you look at Peter Quill and the relationship with his mother through music. It's kind of like that with my father in this movie to some degree, in which all the songs that are used here he listens
Mhm.
to every day still. Like he loves these songs because it makes him go back to this time period. So there's a lot of George Lucas in this movie, a lot of the man in this movie, in a down to earth way. Before we go more philosophical with George Lucas on the screen, on the big screen of Star Wars. Before we go into kind of like, so this is pretty much how George Lucas grew up, the kind of the car kid and everything. But then on the flip side, you have like what's going on inside the man's head. He's that little boy, walk into the twin sunset, just thinking, I want more out of life. Like that's George Lucas, And then of course later on the corporate version of George Lucas is the guy in the black helmet, but we're not going to dwell on that right now. Fact of the matter is, this is a classic that opened a lot of doors for the man. Essentially, when you look back on it, the first thing that pops in my mind when I watch this movie is, essentially, it's Happy Days with a budget.
Yeah, essentially, yes, you're not wrong. For a long time, I actually thought that was literally what it was.
now I don't know if you covered. Did you cover the Happy Days stuff in your background?
Not really. I mean, obviously, outside of like you got the Ron Howard connection, I don't really have a ton other than that.
Okay, let me share this little nugget of wisdom
Okay.
to show you how background's really done for a moment.
Oh my god, dude.
I'm kidding. Yeah. So Happy Days. Apparently, back in the way back, Happy Days had a pilot in '72. They made this pilot, which is I think it was Love American Style or Love American Style, and then there was like a subtitle afterwards. But essentially, Love American Style, which I think Harold Gould played, played Howard Cunningham before they got Tom Bosley. Anyway, so basically, it was a proof of concept pilot. They had all the young actors there. We had, I think pretty much everyone was. I forget if Marion Ross was there, but essentially, you had your trio. You had your main trio. You had, Richie, Potsy, and Ralph Mouth, and essentially, so that was kind of out there, and they made this movie, and essentially, this movie, the pilot was on a shelf, and this movie was kind of basically brought Ron Howard in the casting. Like, oh yeah, I saw that pilot. Let's put Ron Howard in this. Let's put some of let's put Ron Howard in this. Kind of go for like a setting similar to that. The networks essentially saw this movie like, oh my god, this movie's really good, and this is getting some traction. Maybe there is some lifeblood to this pilot, and that essentially is why Happy Days got made.
Yeah, I mean, Happy Days in this movie. I mean, obviously, you got Ron Howard. Ron Howard, more or less, not by name, but he's more or less playing the same character.
That's the thing. In many senses, this movie is proto Happy Days, and
of course, it literally even has the same opening credits theme song.
Well, that's the thing, though. I'm pretty sure that, like, again, I have to go back to the pilot to know for sure, but I think Smart Money is that they got the opening of the first season of Happy Days from this movie.
Sure. I'm
like
sure.
The movie opens on that song. We're going to open Happy Days on that song before they found their
When I was a kid, Dragon, I fully thought that this movie was like actually connected to the Happy Days IP. I really did.
It is. In a sense, it is. That's the thing. You can't really say this thing is completely like the genesis of Happy Days, but essentially, it is what brings Happy Days and the promise. This movie is what gives Happy Days the green light.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, this thing ultimately, this thing feels like Happy Days with a budget, but it's like, what if Happy Days had a little bit more grit to it, and had a cinematic runtime? Like essentially that's kind of what that is. So I really like this movie. I will say this, looking back on it with perspective, I do think we linger on the then nostalgia just to establish the period.
Dragon, this was like the original Member Berries movie, though. That's the thing.
I know, that's the thing. So it's kind of, in some sense, that you feel like in a modern context, we would trim out a lot of like, okay, we're in the '60s and we're still in the '60s, and there's the
that's literally what this movie is, though.
It is. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of that there. I'm not saying that's a problem, but I am saying looking back, and I wonder if we would have done that the same way or not, just given where we are now versus like then. It was like the big thing. Like, we're going to go back and get nostalgic, and nostalgia then was less '90s. It was more 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I still maintain that Nick and Nora's Infinite playlist, that's a little bit more on the obscure side as far as Michael Cera's lead roles in the 2000s, but that to me is very much kind of like a modern day American Graffiti, in the sense that like it's following a group of kids that are kind of like on the at the end of their high school run. They're all kind of trying to decide what to do with their lives. There's a romance going on. There's like, with the Infinite playlist of it all, obviously music's involved. So one of these days we'll have to check out Nick and Nora's Infinite playlist. Man, that's like one of my sentimental favorites. Anyways, so for this movie, Dragon, I didn't actually see it until I was in high school, just because I had always heard about it, but I just, I don't know, for whatever reason, I kind of didn't think I would get into it or something. And honestly, even when I did see it in high school, with the structure of it being so loose, it took me a long time to really fully appreciate what this movie was doing. It really did. It actually took me seeing it in a full-blown movie theater a couple years ago. I saw it as like, one of my theaters, like flashback cinema screenings. And I got to tell you, man, that screening, that was like the moment where this movie kind of came together for me in my head, because not only was I finally, I feel like, old enough to really appreciate a lot of the deeper themes of Kurt's character, and just, sort of like the people being on the precipice of like adulthood and stuff. But also just the magic of watching that movie in theaters and then literally being steps away from the streets that they filmed the cruising scenes on. Like literally walking out of the theater and stepping into the world of the movie, essentially. That was an experience I'll never forget. So like I honestly, it's not one that I go to a lot, just because, like I said, I do think structurally, like, there is a really interesting thing with the editing of this movie that we'll get into. And I kind of feel like other filmmakers have come along and sort of like perfected the whole, like we're not going to be following any one lead character. We're going to be following a bunch of stories and kind of weaving in and out of them. This movie was one of the first to really do that, though. And so it's a trailblazer, but because it's one of the first, it's a little clunkier than, some of the other movies that would go along to really pioneer that style. Like I'm thinking like Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia is a really big example of that. But yeah, I really like this movie a lot. And honestly, the older I get, the more it resonates with me, especially the themes. I think the themes of this movie are pretty timeless in spite of the time capsule of it all. Whew. All right, so let me get into some background. Like Dragon said, the genesis of this movie basically came from Lucas. He had some success with THX 1138, just as a short film. He had like academic success with it as a short film. As a feature film, he had some success with it as well. And it was Francis Ford Coppola who was basically like, George, I dare you to make just a teen movie that just makes people laugh and isn't too deep. And the irony is, I think, is that George Lucas did take up the challenge with Coppola. He did make a teen movie that on surface level is very nostalgic, very, very syrupy and sentimental and not a lot going on. But again, I want to reiterate, there are some very deep themes going on in this movie that I'm looking forward to exploring. So that was the genesis, Dragon. That was the genesis point. Lucas, he had always envisioned this movie being set in Modesto, which was, of course, his hometown. But in the 10 years since he had left Modesto, he felt that the culture of it, the architecture and everything just was not in that same style, like it had changed too much. So he initially set his sights on San Rafael, Dragon, and this is a town that's about 20 miles-ish away from me. And I gotta tell you, it is interesting that he set his sights there, because San Rafael is very much like, if you drive through it, it does kind of feel like a mere Petaluma in a lot of ways. Like it has a lot of the same architecture, kind of like a vaguely similar layout, with the way that it's downtown is essentially like one big loop that we just see over and over and over again in this movie. But then, of course, famously, they moved about 20 minutes west and, it's 20 minutes north of San Rafael, and landed in my humble small town of Petaluma, California, and just basically put my town on the map in a big way. My town, before this movie, Dragon, it really was just a farmer town that you would pass through on your way in between San Francisco and wine country. And this movie turned it into a yuppie tourist town that you pass through in between San Francisco and wine country. So, this town did do a lot for this movie did do a lot for the economy of the town and the public interest in the town. Let's see. So as far as the actual filming goes, Lucas at first thought that he wanted to take on all the cinematography. And honestly, I really wish he did, because if he did, then this would have made the story I'm about to tell even cooler. But he did not. He decided to give it off to two other people. Importantly, before I get into the story, I should mention that the way that they filmed this was actually pretty groundbreaking, in the fact that they essentially had two cameras, one that was pointed outside the cars and one that was pointed inside the cars, to cover both of the angles at the same time for any given scene. And that really kind of paved the way for a lot of how modern day coverage is done, with, doing different angles at the same time instead of doing the shot and then the shot reverse shot. So let me regale you with a little story. My grandpa had just opened a pet store on the same street that, the famous scene with the Milner ties the tow thing to the police car, and then the police car.
Not Milner, Kurt.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. It was Kurt. I don't know.
It was Milner's enemy, though.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Was Milner's
so
enemy.
Kurt. Yeah. So the scene where the cop drives off and his basically the back half of his car gets disattached.
The axle gets disattached. Yes.
Right. So my grandpa was rolling into work one day, and he was about to park Dragon, because if you notice, there is like that scene basically takes place in a parking lot. And he was about to just literally pull into that parking lot. But
a bearded man said, no, you can't park there.
Well, essentially, yes, Dragon. And like I said, if George Lucas was the sole cinematographer, then I could have very accurately said that George Lucas yelled at my grandpa. But my grandpa did get chewed out.
All your celebrity encounters involve you or a family member being yelled at by said celebrity. You ever notice that?
Not Greg Sestero.
Well, I was thinking more Gonzo, but
Greg Sestero and I really like getting on his wavelength about the David Fincher stuff. That was a nice little encounter. Anyways.
Anyway, point being, your grandfather was about to
They chewed him out specifically for his headlights being on when they were trying to get the shot. Like, come on, man, you're messing up the lighting, goddamn it.
We're trying to make an iconic piece of cinema.
Do you see all these studio lights out here? And then you got your headlights in the middle of all of it.
Get out of here, pet store boy.
Essentially, yes.
Go feed the rabbits.
Oh my god. So yeah, that is my family's association with this movie. And again, I kind of wish that George Lucas had stayed on as the sole cinematographer, because then I would know for sure that it was George Lucas getting mad at my grandpa.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. As far as the actual filming goes, it was done in record time, essentially. It was done in about 20 days. Of course, Petaluma wasn't the only location that they shot in, but Dragon, basically any scene that you see in a car where there's cruising involved, that's all Petaluma, man. That's all essentially Petaluma Boulevard, Western Avenue, and then Kentucky Street. Like, it's all just like the same 3 streets over and over and over again. And if you are familiar with downtown Petaluma, you will notice that it is those same 3 streets over and over and over again. And so let's see. Of course, they also filmed at Mel's Drive-In in San Francisco, the original Mel's Drive-In. Believe it or not, that was already an establishment. It's not actually just an American Graffiti IP. A lot of people make that mistake because of the Universal Studios thing. Mm-hmm. Let's see. They filmed a little bit of it in Santa Rosa. Over the high school. For a long time, I thought the stuff at the high school was filmed at my high school, but it was not. And so just in general, this was really a trailblazer in a lot of different ways. This was one of the first big indie movies. Universal, they shopped it around to a lot of different studios. Universal was the one that landed on it. And Universal had this program going on where they were essentially trying out different up and coming directors, giving them small budgets, but also giving them a lot of freedom to basically do whatever they wanted. And the movies that came out, there were 4 movies, including American Graffiti. The other 3, Dragon, they're so obscure, honestly, that they're not really even worth mentioning. Like, I should have written them down. I don't
really... Like American Graffiti, they did not break new ground.
No, they really didn't. They really didn't. But American Graffiti most definitely did break new ground.
It broke new ground.
God. So a lot of the other background stuff, I think we can pretty much cover in the movie itself, like the editing, how groundbreaking the use of the soundtrack was, which that's a big deal with this movie. But I think we can kind of cover that as we go through the movie, right?
Yeah, sure. I used this the punchline though being at the end of it all after American Graffiti comes out. George is looking really self-confident. He's looking to Francis and he's saying, "Well, Francis, now I dare you to make a crime epic." We saw how that worked out. Point being, these directors, I'm making that up, by the way, so that did not happen at all. But it's just the idea of like, these directors, them daring each other leads to just icons of cinema.
Right.
Being the operative point, like, hey, Steven, you want to go they're in the aquarium one day? Steven, bet you can't do that. Oh, yeah, George, give me my hat, George. I'm going to direct this movie.
All right.
Anyway,
we got Little Blue in the comments here. He said, I just randomly thought of mentioning this. There's a YouTube video of a stormtrooper with the American Graffiti cars. I can buy that. Also, one other thing I should mention with Petaluma, just as a whole. Obviously, after this movie came out, Dragon, anyone in the town council of Petaluma, any official people related to Petaluma, they do not want a soul to forget that American Graffiti was shot here. Like, that is like our big selling point as a town. We have a full weekend devoted to American Graffiti. I'm pretty sure there's been stars that have come out for it.
well,
More.
If that's the case, how has this week been? Or having this month been?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think that it happened this month, and it should have. I think it happens the same month every year, and it's not this month. I don't know why.
Well, that's ridiculous, because this month is the 50th anniversary. Why would they not do that?
Let me look it up really quick.
I mean, they're bringing American Graffiti back this Sunday because of National Cinemas Day.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they wouldn't do it this month. I
see. This is why Petaluma.
I'm pretty sure it's always in May. I'm pretty sure it's like a beginning of summer sort of deal.
See, this is the kind of thinking as to why Petaluma does not have more of a tourist draw, because it's like we're going to celebrate American Graffiti, but on the wrong month. 50th anniversary? We're the American Graffiti town. We don't need to celebrate the 50th anniversary. They know who we are, darn it.
Me and my sister, like, we would go down to the American Graffiti days when we were like teenagers and in college, and just in the totally like false hope that we'd ever run into George Lucas.
Oh, Tiki, do you have anything to mention about the sequel, or do you want to save that for the conversation?
I have not actually. I did watch the sequel. I haven't rewatched it. I think the sequel is kind of its own thing. The big thing I have to say about the sequel, we can talk about when it comes to editing. So,
okay, let's break it down.
All right. Feels like people seem to forget that there was a sequel. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the sequel it's got its moments. But yeah, okay. So, I guess we can start with the editing right away. Honestly, we can bring it up because it is kind of like the crux of the movie where, of course, we have Mel's drive-in as like the opening set piece to just kind of like establish all the characters and the storylines going on. But then very quickly, the characters kind of like break off. And so...
so we have roughly 4 storylines, and we have, overall our structure says it's 62. It's a coming-of-age story, mainly for 2 friends. And it's the last night they're in their hometown of Modesto, California, in the very bustling kind of like teen 60s kind of setting there. Like, we have cars are very central to the culture of the radio with the Wolfman.
Right.
And the music.
We'll get to the music in just a second. I just want to point out, because the music, you're right, is another really big thing with this movie, obviously. But the big thing with the editing is that Lucas's wife this was one of her first editing gigs, and what she really did, and she really is kind of like the sort of the unsung hero of this movie in the editing bay. Dragon, initially, this movie was going to be broken up into basically different segments. So, like, you would see all of Kurt's segment, then you would see all of the.
You're saying it would have been essentially linearly or vignetted, is what you're
right.
saying.
Dragon, I'm sorry. Throughout this whole podcast, I'm gonna want to call fucking Steve Ritchie, and you're gonna have to just like bear with me on that. But we'd follow Steve and Lori. We'd follow, Toad. And of course, the characters would kind of like weave in and out of each other's stories too. But, you know, it would be basically playing all the storylines from beginning to end. And I assume the bookends of the film would essentially be Mel's drive-in at the start. And then I assume everything would kind of come back together for the big drag race at the end.
Yeah.
And so, thanks to Lucas's wife, we got a movie that was much more free flowing. And again, I feel like other movies have come along that have really perfected that kind of editing style. There is still some rough patches with the editing here, but it is one of the first movies to really be edited that linearly.
And Blue says American Graffiti was technically Lucasfilm's first film because Lucasfilm. I'm not sure if
that is true. That is true. Yeah.
Was that track though? Is that what happened?
I'm pretty sure that tracks. Oh, and another big thing that I should mention with this movie is this is one of the first movies, Dragon, that everyone involved in the production got a credit at the end of at the end credits.
Huh.
And the reason that happened was because the budget obviously was really, really thin. And so Lucas essentially hired a bunch of his friends from film school to be the crew. But in return for basically working for, it wasn't nothing, but it was definitely not like a big salary. But in return, he said that every last one of them who worked on the movie would be in the credits, which is not, usually it was just department heads at the time that were in the credits. So that was a big trailblazing thing.
All right.
And another big trailblazing thing, and this should kind of jump us into the actual film proper, the soundtrack. Because yes, this movie, still to this day, it's one of the first movies that uses a mostly non-diegetic soundtrack. And still to this day, I think it's one of the best. I mean, goddamn, the sound editing, the way that they weave all the different Wolfman Jack segments into it. It's just perfection, Dragon. I think the radio stuff is really like literally like the beating pulse of this film.
Yeah, I mean, it's cars and music. Those are the two definitive factors of this film, because 3 out of the 4 stories revolve around cars, and because of that, music is playing over the radio in the cars.
Mm-hmm.
So they very much go hand in hand. But
it's not just the music playing in the cars. It's the fact that without us really realizing it, the mood of each scene is really being set by these songs. And even the Wolfman Jack commentary is, for the most part, there's a lot of almost kind of fourth wall breaking going on, where Wolfman Jack will say something that, hits a little too close to what the characters are actually going through,
I'll give you an example. When they put on 16 Candles, that's very much the coming of age setup at the top there. The fact that, they're 17 now, and they're about to, again, per the plan, they're about to fly off to college in the morning. But, again, it's the whole thing, we're not kids anymore sort of thing. Very much what 16 Candles is all about. Basically, we're not 16, we are 17.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's see. So again, just the main crux of the movie is you have these two friends who are, one of the Kurt, the Richard Dreyfuss characters, having essentially, we have Proto Richie and Steve. Obviously, we have
essentially yes.
We have Proto Ralph. I think he's a fusion of Ralph and Potsy. I don't know if you.
I think that's accurate. I think you could say that.
I think he's a fusion of them because my instinct is Potsy, but I don't know. I think there's a little bit more of a Ralph Mouth swagger to him. But point being, kind of a little bit of that. I don't know where Toad fits in the equation, but we have a few Proto Happy Days characters. we have Proto Joni and Fonzie later, but we'll get there.
Wait, would that make Harrison Ford Fonzie?
No, he's not Fonzie.
Okay.
No. Anyway, John Milner's Fonzie.
Oh yes. Oh, that makes total sense.
And Carol's like Proto Joni. Anyway, so point being, so again, those two are having this thing where Kurt's having second thoughts, and he's basically thinking about taking the gap year. Where Steve's like, no, we're not taking a gap year. We're gonna go out and do this. This is our last night. Let's say our goodbyes. And they kind of they year off, and they go on a journey.
And I love a good role reversal script. In this movie with the 2 character arcs, does that really, really well with Steve learning to appreciate what he has back home, and then Kurt learning that, it is his path to go out and, really take that leap. I genuinely think that's like the music is the pulse of the movie, but the kind of like that arc between those two characters is definitely the heart, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot of you see the thought process within the arc of like, okay, you're seeing them make an act. It's not like a light switch, you're seeing them kind of like processing what's happened through the night, which, by the way, structure wise, I do like that. It kind of has this almost, not technically, not 24-hour cycle, but kind of this, has like this, like over the course of the night, cycle. Because again, in the morning, it's the 6th. The morning,
roughly like 12-ish hours.
Yes, that's about right. Like 12.
Yeah.
Daylight savings applied to this year.
Right.
But, anyway, so let's see. So I guess break a few of them down here. So we have. Oh, by the way, something too in the structure. I like that we have like the walk and drive scenes where they're basically like either someone's walking, the car's going alongside, or they're having conversations while both in vehicles. That must have been really difficult to film. Imagine like, okay, you're talking, but you're going to be like, I know they're probably driving by the camera in certain shots, but some shots are going to be having conversations while they're both in motion.
And I can also confirm that this movie was shot in the very, very early hours, hence my grandpa showing up at like 5 a.m. and they were like in the middle of the shoot. That was that way like the whole shoot was like there, like I'm assuming like like 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. like those kind of hours.
And Lucas is like whispering to his either to the AD or the cinematographer, like, the pet store guy's back again. Can you?
Oh my god, dude! What if Lucas just still has a grudge against the pet store guy?
It's like, oh, he complicated my shot. It was my big shot. It's the biggest part of the movie, but still, to get that shot, everything I had to go through, I had to yell at this pet store guy. It was a whole thing.
Oh my god, I love it. I love how my grandpa
I had to chase him out of the shot, and he had his lights on. It was just ruining everything.
He's inserted himself into the lore of this movie now. God.
Yep. Anyway, so Steve and Laurie.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they're having some relationship issues. Another Happy Days alumni, more like Laverne, tangentially connected to Happy Days. Cindy Williams of Laverne and Shirley fame. She plays Laurie.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the fun fact there being she tested for Princess Leia.
Yeah.
So yeah, he brings up the very bad idea, like maybe we should date other people when we're when I go off to college.
It's Steve that brings it up, right?
Yeah, Steve brings it up. Yeah.
Yeah, like she's like really taken aback by it, like, and rightfully so. I mean, I honestly, Dragon, I'm always of the opinion, this is just me, call me old fashioned, but I'm always of the opinion that if like the whole like we should see other people thing comes into the equation, yeah, just do the breakup at that point. You know what I mean? It's like you're just kind of dragging out the inevitable at that point if like other people are already part of the equation.
It's not like you're married or anything, like that's a whole nother conversation. The whole like, do you have that weird open marriage thing or do you not? But that's it's like you don't do when you're dating. That's ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. I can't even wrap my mind around the open marriage. I'm saying I guess some people do that though.
We're old-fashioned, Dragon. We're old-fashioned when it comes to our dating habits, and maybe that's why. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe that's why I am so bad at it.
All right. So let's see. So anyway, so they go to the hop, which I guess is kind of like the last thing. It's in the high school, so I guess kind of like I think the idea is Laurie is in high school, right?
I think the idea is that she's at least a couple years younger. She might be a freshman.
I don't know if she's a freshman. I'm saying the very least there might be a year difference or something.
Uh-huh.
So the idea she can't go with them to college, so she's not graduated yet. I think is the idea.
Well, the only reason I float out that she might be a freshman is that the hop is like specifically for freshmen.
Oh, really? I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, that was kind of like the whole thing with the hop is that.
That's probably a thing.
The freshman prom.
Okay, that makes sense then. Anyway, so yeah, they go to the hop, which to me drags a bit. The hop is the main sequence of the movie. Like, okay, this is just like living in the '60s here. I mean, it's nice, and I don't mind.
There is one bit of trivia that I like regarding the way that they shot it, which is the snowball dance. Do you know about this?
God, I know. What about the snowball dance?
So basically, like the actual structure of what a snowball dance would entail is that like the main couple starts the dance, right? But then they will you see everyone kind of like waiting off on the sides, and they'll And then the couple will like drag other couples into the dance, like gradually, and hence snowball. Like as the dance goes on, more and more people get added to it. And so Steve and Lori, they start off the snowball dance. They're the big people, and essentially they never drag anyone else into the dance because the conversation is so intense. And so you just see all the people like on the sidelines kind of like looking like, hey, when's it my turn? What gives? What are you guys doing?
Yeah. You're right. Everyone kind of falls away. So we put kind of the spotlight on the dance and the main couple. But I do like how they have like an argument while they're doing like this romantic slow dance.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like, I kind of wonder if maybe the background people were like directed to kind of have the body language of like, what gives? Come on, Yeah. Or if they just didn't realize that they were fucking up the flow of an actual snowball dance with this scene. So it's a fun bit of trivia, I think. All right. But I agree that the high school stuff, especially now that I know that it's not shot at my high school. Selfishly, Dragon, if it was shot at my high school, I would probably enjoy the stuff a lot more. But no, it is kind of like the slow point of the movie. There's also one storyline in general that's like it's fine. I just don't really think it's as memorable as some of the other stories, which we'll get into. Also, Dragon, really quick, I want to bring up one thing that I forgot to bring up with the background. Is that Lucas based 3 of the characters after different time periods in his life. Steve was essentially the only one of the 3 main male leads that wasn't based on Lucas. Steve was basically just like, the quintessential like Joe College everyman, essentially. But so Milner was basically like Lucas's metalhead days, right? Like that was like him when he was getting into the into the drag race scene. It was essentially him actually going out and doing the cruises and stuff. It's like basically like in the time period that this movie is set in, Lucas was the Milner of the group.
No, I absolutely got that, yeah.
And then Toad is meant to be essentially Lucas as a freshman. Like basically was like Lucas before he found the gearhead stuff, which was kind of the thing that sort of like, gave him confidence and sort of gave him a little bit of a swagger. So
it does feel that Toad, Milner, and a little bit of Kurt are very much like there. It's kind of Lucas split in 3 parts.
And then, of course, Kurt is, like the post-high school, Lucas going to film school and pursuing different passions, but still kind of having like his heart in his hometown.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the binary sunset, Lucas. That's him kind of like pondering, like, what's next? What's out there for me?
Kurt's storyline really is perfect when you look at it from like the binary sunset point of view. Yeah. So can we maybe let's get into the one storyline that I'm really not. It's fine. I just think it's the weakest one out of the 4.
Okay.
I would say the weakest one out of the 4 is Toad.
Yeah, I mean, Toad's put the Toad story is purely put in there for comedy. That's what Toad's just.
Toad basically feels like a proto teen comedy, whereas the rest of this movie is essentially a lot more deep and introspective. Whereas Toad, like you said, he is very much just the comic relief.
Yeah, exactly. That's all he is, and it's very much it's this. He goes on his date with Debbie because he has the car. I love that like how we kind of get Debbie into things where it's like, you look just like Connie Stevens. Like it sells her. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have some car humor like the double entendres, like feel the upholstery, like feel it.
Oh God.
We have the adventure.
But just like I don't know, it's never sat right with me that these two would be so fucking dumb that they're like laying out on a blanket and don't realize that the car has been stolen until they can't hear the radio.
I think they were a little busy with other things during.
Okay, but I'm just saying that's still like the plot point where I'm just like I don't buy it.
Okay.
I mean, especially when it's not your car. When I don't know, if it were me, I would very much be cognitive
Well,
of
remember,
like,
for all intents and purposes, that is like his car because essentially he's going, and then eventually he'll basically he has until Christmas.
yeah, so it's not his car.
Well, you're right. It's not his. I'm just saying that he's taken ownership of this car, and he's kind of feigning the confidence. This is my car now. I'm a
uh-huh.
car guy, not a Vespa guy. I'm a car guy. Look at me.
Oh my god.
He's buying booze. I love the gamut. The gag, the buying the booze is really funny in terms of like he finally gets someone to buy the booze, and it's a guy robbing the place. Like that's funny. Like come on, that was a really good joke.
I guess so, but I feel like the buying the booze thing is kind of like that. The problem with that scene is, and it's not really the movie's fault at all. It's just like the whole trying to buy alcohol and trying, like as a teenager, that has been done to death in so many other teen comedies and much
This is
more
when it was
memorably
done,
in a
though.
lot of other cases.
This is when they started that, though.
No, I know, I realize that, but that's kind of like, that's kind of like the double-edged sword of being the first on the scene is that, I mean, Dragon, let's face it, nothing, as far as like these types of buying alcohol scenes, you can't touch McLovin, man. Like, I don't even really like Superbad that much, but just as far as like a scene involving trying to buy fake alcohol, you just can't touch McLovin. All right. But yeah, Toad, I don't know. I just feel like as a character, like I don't really feel the chemistry between him and the girl he's trying to get with. I feel like throughout most of the night, she is pretty clearly just kind of miserable and sort of like mostly just embarrassed for him. So because of that, I don't really buy that, like that it actually ended up well for him in the end. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, when you look at it at the end of the day, though, she was, she was rather content. She's rather easy to please. It's like, just get her some food and get her a brew, and that's about it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of bullshit on top of that
Yeah,
she has to go through.
true. I don't look. That's not Yates, Tiki. But I mean, I don't know. It's the teen comedy. It's kind of like again to fulfill the parameters of the dare of Coppola. There is of Coppola. He's got to, we got to put some teen comedy in there for the viewers.
I mean, that's fair because there is comedy in other spots in the movie, but like Toad is very much like the broad level of it.
Like Kurt's comedy really builds around one big moment, and then you have Toad again. You have basically kind of like the runner when we just kind of check back with teen shenanigans, and we have the pathos with Steve. Then we have a John Milner, which starts. I mean, John Milner's clever humor, but then it kind of builds to we're having just more spectacle with the racing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, where do you want to go next?
Well, I guess we should talk about John Miller. John Miller is probably the most interesting aspect of this movie. He's proto Fonzie. He's the town hero for drag racing. He's enemies with Holstein the cop, who wants to. Now here's a missed opportunity I felt. So Holstein the cop, he wants to catch him in the act and made a really big dramatic point.
Mm.
It feels like Holstein is a 3-act structure and we're missing an act. It feels like we have the start. And we have a great start and we have a great finish, but we're missing tension in the middle. Because I was on the edge of my seat. Now, I'm not saying I'm complaining that we didn't do this, but a part of me is like, when Milner is getting to that fight to save Toad's bacon, I'm thinking, oh, and he's gonna have him over a barrel watching him in this fight or something. Where no, it was it just felt like there should have been tension of like, okay, the cops, like Holstein's almost got him, and then we're gonna have to take Holstein out of the equation. I love the way we take Holstein out of the equation. It just feels like we kind of forgot too long that Holstein's a problem,
Mm-hmm. No, I feel that definitely structurally, it's kind of there's no real tension. Yeah, with Milner, I do think that he's one of the more interesting characters because I very much think his whole arc is essentially like the guy who, he is kind of the town hero still. Everyone still kind of respects him. But given his experiences with Carol, I feel like he's realizing that he's getting too old for this shit. And, like he can't just live in the glow of being the hometown hero for the rest of his life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of realization sort of like comes about like very gradually. And let's talk about Carol, because I feel like Carol is a character in this movie that could have Dragon, they really, really towed a fine line with her, because it would have been so easy for this character in retrospect to be like the black mark on this movie as far as like the ick factor. You know what I mean? But really, I really think that her scenes play pretty naturally, because obviously you can tell that Milner at no point is actually like, you know, he'll joke about it, of course, but at no point is he seriously thinking about actually, you know, like, hey, I might have a chance with this literal child, you know? But there is like this kind of like adorable, like brother-sister dynamic that kind of evolves out of it. And Milner, I love that as the movie goes on, he sort of like starts to appreciate this, you know, this kind of like little sister energy that Carol has. And I don't know, I honestly think it's adorable. And I think it's one of the brightest spots in the movie. And like I said, like a role like that could have very easily gone so wrong.
Yeah, man, I like that there is a lot of edgy humor with.
There is, yeah.
With Carol, especially.
But I like how Carol, like throughout the whole thing, she knows she has all the power in the situation. Mm-hmm.
Which again is what ultimately is like the biggest safeguard here. Of like, okay, the girl obviously is just messing with him, and she's holding all the cards here. And he made the stupid play, like, "Hey, unknown girl I can't see, coming."
exactly. Right.
So you know, he did bring a lot of this on himself, and you know that's the thing. But obviously, But I like this. It shows us Milner's a good guy. He's not going to like do anything.
He's not just going to like dump her out on the street. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to dump her out on the street, and more so, he's not going to do anything like bad. You know, with her like a scumbag or anything.
Well, I said, I like that, you know, like he does joke about it a couple times, but in a very obviously joking way. Yeah. And, you know, inherently, like we as an audience, there is just the thought that he would doesn't even cross our mind at all. You know, it's just not something that's in the equation.
And we have like this, the payoff too, where he basically uses reverse psychology to scare her straight and to get her the whole thing of like, you know, yes, I'm madly in love with you.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. Also, because one of the fun standouts, and every time I see a clip of American Graffiti, it's either one of two things: either the Axel, or it's the "well, I'm a ready Teddy, well, get bent turkey," and you throw the water balloon in Carol's face.
Yeah, that's the Empire of Dreams clip, right? Yep,
that's the one. That's the one.
Fun fact about that clip: that when they shot that, it was actually just meant to hit the window on Carol's side. And then Carol, you know, you can see she's like laughing, and the actress is just genuinely laughing because she thinks the take is a flub. But Lucas was, you know, he was on a very tight schedule, and he enjoyed kind of like, you know, how natural that reaction was and how playful it was. And so he just kind of kept it in. He was very much like, okay, let's move along. Good. Another good example of that is right at the very beginning when Toad pulls up on his scooter and he crashes the scooter. That was not meant to happen, but very much like Lucas was like, yeah, that's some character. Let's go. We don't need to reshoot it. So there's quite a few moments like that, you know, flubbed lines and stuff like that just kind of like that Lucas put in. And honestly, I think every single occasion where it happens, I feel like it adds authenticity. I think it was a great choice, like a very practical thing for him to do. Like he really, you know, he was on such a tight schedule. He really didn't have a choice but to do it that way. But I really do think it ended up working out for the final product very well.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's see. So also, we should talk about Harrison Ford. Let's talk about Bob Falfa.
That's a great name, too. Okay, do you know the trivia involving Harrison Ford in this movie?
Well, I mean, I know how it feeds into the Star Wars casting, but how? What do you got?
So Lucas wanted him to cut his hair because he was like, "Now Harrison, you know, it's the '60s. Kids' hair isn't that long now. You know, I mean, obviously, late '60s, but you know, in the early '60s, kids did not have their hair that long." And Harrison was essentially like, "George, the part's not big enough for me to cut my hair, but I'll wear a cowboy hat for you."
So that's where the hat came from.
That's where the hat came from. Yeah, yeah. But again, it's one of those happy accidents because I feel like the hat just adds a lot of mystique to this character. Because essentially, this guy is kind of like, like the Lone Ranger. You know what I mean? He's like the stranger who kind of pops out from out of town in order to challenge the sheriff, essentially.
Yeah, no, you're right. He's like the whole new sheriff. There's like a new sheriff in town, so like this town ain't big enough for the both of us. Really, that's like kind of the Western thing.
Right, exactly.
In this case, a Western.
I mean, the movie does very much end on what is essentially a Wild West shootout with cars.
Yeah, no, essentially, we have like this build up too. Like, it literally ends at high noon. It ends at like dawn. Well, more like dawn, but same difference. Yeah. Let's see. So, let's see. Also, it's a nice little arc too. Milner and Toad. They kind of become friends after he saves his bacon, and they're kind of like almost set up for. I don't know how the sequel goes, but set up for a spin-off or a sequel at the end. We'll take them all.
And then let's see. We also have Laurie kind of getting in the clutches of Bobby Boy here, and I think that's honestly probably the most interesting element of the Steve and Laurie story is Steve kind of like having to rush to essentially save her from the Gaston, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. I got to admit, though, the problem is once she's in the car, really nothing exciting happens. It's literally just them like just having a miserable time.
You get to hear Harrison Ford sing show tunes, Dragon. What do you mean nothing exciting happens?
Okay, fair point.
That is seriously an amazing moment. That always catches me off guard.
No, you're right. That was fun. But my point is the fact that like that's it. It really is just like they don't have two nice words to say to each other. It's just kind of in the car. It's like, why'd you get in this car? What was it?
Right.
I mean, I know she's trying to get away from, but like, who is this? How does this spite anyone? It's just like he hasn't even met this guy. Okay, this is how you spite Milner. This is not how you spite. This is how you spite Steve.
Yeah, I feel. That's
the issue I have. But you're right, though. Harrison Ford saying show tunes.
It does add some. It does add some spice to the storyline, though, because like I said, by all intents and purposes, he is the most boring of the lead characters. He is pretty much just the everyman.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so let's talk about Kurt and the Pharaohs.
Yeah. Is it fair to say Kurt is definitely the best storyline in the film?
Kurt and Milner, but yeah, probably Kurt. Yeah.
I love the Milner stuff too. Don't get me wrong. And like I said, I think the Milner stuff is doubly impressive when you factor in just how many ways that storyline could have gone wrong and could have been dated, but it's not. But Kurt, I think, like I said, he is very much the heart of the movie.
Feels like the most Kevin Smith element of the movie.
What?
Feels like the most Kevin Smith storyline of the film.
He very much feels like a proto Kevin Smith character. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, what this movie, which Kevin Smith movie this reminds me of most?
What?
Mallrats.
I could see that. A lot
of Mallrats. Instead of in a mall, it's on a road. It's in a little town.
But it does kind of like capture the, that's what I'm saying about Nick and Nora, though. Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist very much kind of like captured the, the life, the teen nightlife of New York City at the time. And the movie does very much like live and breathe like iPod culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So every generation does kind of have their American Graffiti. All right. But yeah, so Kurt, I don't know, there's just so many, like, I feel like every conversation, every interaction that Kurt has with someone is just packed with meaning, man. It's just, it all just kind of like culminates in, in the whole idea of like, even if he's scared to move on, he knows it's a step that he's going to have to take. And of course we have, the proto beautiful woman in the car who's not following him throughout the movie, but I got to imagine that this woman was a genesis point for the vacation gag, right?
For what gag specifically? Oh no, I know, the Chrissy Brinkley.
Yeah.
I mean,
I got to imagine.
Let's see. I'm trying to like year wise. I mean, yeah, this is probably. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it would stand to reason. It would stand to reason. Yeah, this is probably the inspiration for it. Yeah. So the fact is, she symbolizes in this movie specifically. You know, she symbolizes. You know, it's he's looking for. I view it as he's looking for a reason to stay, like the impossible.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
That's what I always read his story as being here. That he's chasing this girl. He's indecisive, which to me I found on a personal. I hate how indecisive I am so often. So I found it very relatable, especially a guy at the crossroads in this case. So he's at a crossroads. He's looking for like a sign from the universe or like a reason to stay. And like everyone's saying, hey, you're crazy, man. Don't go to do chasing like this random blonde girl. And he does. And he has a little visit with Wendy, who's a much more achievable option. And I do think it's really funny how both he and Steve get kicked out of the cars. When they're romancing their ladies. In this case, I love how Kurt embarrasses that Wendy's little friend there. It's just like, oh, she really likes you, and he just kicks him out.
right, immediately.
And that of course lands him in trouble with the Pharaohs. So the Pharaohs. So Tiki. Kurt scratched Gil's car.
How fucking dare he?
Oh, not Gil's car.
I love how we don't even ever meet Gil.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so they scratched Gil's car. Yeah.
Well, the Pharaohs, I imagine they must have been more kind of like Modesto culture. Because I can tell you right now, Dragon, the people that would have essentially been in this position in Petaluma were the Hicks.
Yeah.
Like the Hicks were like the top brass who would like just run around town and act like they knew act like they owned the place, and they were essentially a gang unto themselves.
Well, so you're saying the Hicks are the ones who would walk by and intimidate the pet store crowd?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So so the Pharaohs though. So the Pharaohs, I gotta wonder this. Do you think they just made up Gil's cars to mess with this guy, or think it's actually Gil's car?
I would think that it was actually Gil's car. I don't know.
Okay, so yes. Anyways, he goes in this. Basically, they kind of put the fear of God into him, which leads into eventually leads into Kurt's initiation into the gang. Which, by the way, I do like that Rich Dreyfuss is playing this scene so well, where like they go into this convenience store, which essentially
I really like that scene. That scene really speaks to me just because of the whole like Dragon. There's been a lot of people in my life, like a lot of teachers, a lot of like friends of my parents and stuff like that, who just like they see the potential in me, like from a creative standpoint, and I always feel like, frankly, like I'm letting those people down with where I am in my life right now. And so it's like to see something like this where it's like, the Moose Lodge and the scholarship and like, oh, that guy's going to make a fine moose one day. And it's like, I don't know. I've been around a lot of these people. You know what I mean? Like I've been around a lot of people like this that have seen the potential in me. And so it's, I don't know, this scene does randomly cut deep for me on that level, because like Kurt knows inherently that just by being there with these people, he is essentially letting this person down right off the bat.
Yeah, and he's kind of the way that scene plays. Just this whole thing, like it's kind of the double nature of the gag here. Like, oh yeah, we'll it'll be like you won't believe it. You'll be quite surprised when I leave. Something like that.
I'll give you something to remember me by. You'll never forget me.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the Pharaoh's kind of grew to like Kurt too, which is really kind of fun.
Everyone grew to like Kurt. That's the thing about Kurt. He very much is like the hero of the story, Speaking of which, let's get to the big scene, which is, of course, the Wolfman scene. I fucking love how this scene is played.
So, per the Mallrats comparison, this is the main thing made me think Mallrats is essentially as Banky meeting Stan Lee.
Essentially, yes, but it's not like Stan Lee was like, I mean, obviously Stan Lee conversation was woven through the movie, but it's not like Stan Lee was, over the radio throughout the movie. This is just I love how this comes together. First of all, I love the ambiguity at the start of like, is that even him? Is he really just playing tapes of Wolfman? You know what I mean? And then like we see him actually like talking live into the radio at the end. I love how that's all played. That to me gives me like, this is gonna sound like a weird comparison, but it gives me like some Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka vibes of just like, you know, like you just don't quite know what to make of this guy, and you don't really know what this guy wants you to make of him, you know?
Yeah.
I got a whole fridge full of them, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one, I'm a sucker for popsicles, particularly lime. So first of all, I'll be like, "Thank you, Wolfman."
Right.
That's fair. I know you're just trying to get rid of them, but still, thanks.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, there is something mythical. Obviously, we have the whole thing of like, you know, he's on tape when we review okay, he actually is Wolfman, and he's also recording the tapes as well, but he's down.
Well, the trivia about that is that all the tapes that he's actually playing are, you know, because obviously he's not live on the radio as they're, you know, as they're actually filming these scenes. So essentially, he sent in a bunch of these, you know, a bunch of these tapes, like, and Lucas basically got to pick and choose different memorable segments from the show. Except for there is one notable scene, notable radio conversation that features Lucas in a cameo. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
It's the pizza parlor prank phone call.
Oh.
Lucas is the guy on the other end of the phone running the pizza parlor. Fun fact, it's Pinky's Pizza, which is a real pizza parlor in Petaluma that has been around for a long time. And it is actually one of the very first, like, full-blown, you know, pizza parlors in the country.
Oh, cool.
So, like, you know, like, not, it wasn't, because when pizza first was introduced in the country, of course, you'd get it, like, at, you know, with Italian food and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But Pinky's Pizza was one of the very first establishments that was like, no, we are all about pizza. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, that's a neat little bit of Petaluma history and a George Lucas Easter egg all in the same bit. And I will say that Pinky's Pizza, folks, for anyone who's listening, might be visiting Petaluma, Pinky's Pizza, it's still the best pizza in Petaluma. I will attest to that.
So that is the real Wolfman, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, as do I.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but yeah, so he gives him some guidance, without spelling it out for him, and he kind of gives him like a little bit of direction. Here's a big world out there to see. He's kind of this mythic figure.
Mm-hmm.
Now again, it's very kind of deified amongst the you know, his contemporaries.
Again, he kind of gives me a Wonka vibe. That is the vibe I get, which I know is weird, but
yeah. All right, so Steve and Kurt, they reunite, and they have like a good check-in between the two of them here, where they've had a very transformative night, and they've kind of swapped perspectives.
And again, I'm a sucker for screenplays that do this with the leads. I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah, well, Steve wants to stay, Kurt wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
If we had one music choice we could pluck from time, should I stay or should I go?
Oh my god.
Anyway, also, by the way, it's with the music too. Is like, we're gonna let shade the Beach Boys. Like, no, forget the Beach Boys.
But you got to realize the Beach Boys were like the original, like even before the Beatles. They were like a year or two before the Beatles. Like they were like the original boy band. I mean, that's what's fascinating about the Beach Boys.
Literally, they were the boy band.
Right. Even more so than the Beatles. Because although I will say that early Beach Boys way better than early Beatles. I'm just gonna say it.
Hey, when the Boys is ending their second season, they're you know, they're not using a Beatles song; they're using a Beach Boys song.
Exactly.
It even fits because it's called The Boys. They're all the Beach Boys is all the boys.
I feel like God Only Knows is just like the seminal like soundtrack selection.
It's a great song.
I've seen that song be used in so many places, and the thing is, it's always used well.
Yep, Toy Story 4.
The
advertising, and then the end of The Boys. All right. So let's see. So we have the big race at dawn. The big race at dawn. We go from night to day. We have Milner versus Falfa.
Hmm. Again, I
Falfa.
love that name.
Is it Falfa or Falfa?
Falfa.
Falfa. Bob Falfa.
Bob Falfa.
Anyway, so yeah, so we get into the big race, and Milner, he's been kind of dreading. There's been a little bit of anxiety about losing the title and having lost a step, a relatable thing I feel, and he creams him in the race almost too well, where the car wrecks very horrifically. You realize that your kind of heart jumps for a second, like, oh god, Laurie's in that car, no.
I have a nitpick. I think that Lori
Should have died.
and Bob just get all out of this like way too clean.
Do you think Laurie should have died?
No, I don't think she should have died, especially because we're about to get a big fucking gut punch at the end of this movie. So
yeah, that's the thing. So what do you? That's the thing is, I was wondering how
I'm saying
they come out
at
of
least they should have been like roughed up a little. You know what I mean?
Well, you're right. I mean, they vaguely rough up the Harrison Ford's character just a little bit because he had like a torn shirt. That's about it, you know. But I don't know. Do you think we should have saved her and killed him?
I don't know. If you would have killed him, you know, what would have been really interesting if you would have killed him is that would have made the whole, you know, the post, like when we learn of Milner's fate, you know, it would have been really interesting of like, okay, like Milner kind of killed him and then Milner kind of got his comeuppance a year later. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. 'Cause I don't know if it would have been too dark given what we're going to do momentarily if we just had all this.
This movie really does just come out of nowhere and be like, by the way, we're going to make you super depressed. Okay, bye.
Yeah. So Kurt gets thanks to the help of Wolfman Jack with his message.
I love the resolution of this storyline, Dragon. I fucking love it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Tell him what happens.
Well, he gets the conversation, and I love how ambiguous it's played, where it's like you don't really know if, you know, like if you would have stayed, you don't know if anything would have actually happened because she didn't say like, oh yeah, I'll meet up with you for sure. She said, I cruise around. You might see me sometime. You know what I mean?
I read that scene as he chooses to forge his own path versus investing, basically versus inventing a reason to stay that may never pan out. Basically,
exactly, yeah.
He wants a mystery on his own terms versus a mystery girl. You know, he doesn't want to keep. Plus, another way you could look at the whole story of Kurt is that, you know, Kurt's been like, man, I got roped in this thing with the pharaohs. I keep getting thrown out of cars. I don't want to be in this town. I want to go.
I mean, that's very fair. Yeah.
My teaching mentors are dating underage students. I don't want to be in this town.
Right.
He's actually doing the thing.
That is like the one thing in this movie that is genuinely like icky, but it's meant to be icky. So.
Exactly. It's meant to be. So, you know, we have that, and again, Milner, he and Toad are like the whole like we'll take them all sort of thing. Like, oh, where's the spinoff of those guys? I wonder if they got a spinoff or if they're in the sequel or not. But then again, given how this movie ends, you gotta wonder. Like, I think this movie plays far better on standalone, given that thing we have at the very end. It's like,
well, I will say that Toad storyline does tie into his little text because he's basically in war.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, you go to the airport. Back in the day, you could actually drive to the airport.
I know, right?
Crazy. So we have the text, and we reveal that Milner died in a drunk.
Well, really quick. I'm sorry. I just want to acknowledge how great that last shot is with him looking down and seeing the T-bird.
Oh yeah.
Dragon genuinely gives me chills every time. I love a good ambiguous ending like that.
Movie starts with cars, it's got to end with cars.
And it's like he's looking at it, it's like, you know, like it's kind of like, am I making the right call here? You know what I mean? Like, because there she is right there, you know, like I love it. It's kind of almost like a Graduate style ending of like, am I making the right call?
You know what's kind of nice about that too, symbolically? It's the fact that he's leaving the cars behind, like on the ground, like your hometown. The town is represented by the car. He's leaving that behind. Sure. And he is going. He's kind of soaring above the clouds in the plane, which is the graduation from the teenager's card. I'm going off to parts unknown in a plane. So it's kind of like in terms of your vehicles, there's an arc there. He's shooting for the stars, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, then of course we see the text on the screen at the end there, where Milner died, like basically killed by a drunk driver. Toad is MIA, right? Is MIA? Didn't say killed in action.
Missing
Right?
in action, yeah.
He's missing in action, presumably in Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
Steve is an insurance agent, right?
Which, I mean, that totally fits for how boring Steve is just as a character.
Look at all the Steves that we're building here. Okay, we have really mean Steve. You know, we have really mean Steve, and then we have Steve,
Really
and now we just have boring Steve. Or safe Steve. Or
I
safe
mean, seriously, what the hell does this guy even do in the movie? He really doesn't do much.
I mean, he stands up to that one teacher, tells him to kiss a duck. Yeah.
I mean, he really is just kind of like a passive observer through most of the movie, honestly.
I mean, he basically looks sad and eats at a diner. It's
right.
Look at him drink that soda or that milkshake. By the way, random food aside, cherry Coke, yay or nay?
Yay! I like me
Really?
some cherry Coke. Yes.
You like the cherry Coke?
Yes.
Okay.
I will say though, I will raise you this: Coke, like original Coke, is the best, right?
Yeah. Right.
But I will say that cherry Pepsi is better than cherry Coke.
Okay.
I don't know. That's
I can't get behind.
I don't like regular Pepsi on its own, but I do like me a good wild cherry Pepsi.
Yeah, I just can't wrap my head around like the double flavor thing for just anything.
How do you feel about Dr. Pepper?
Don't like it.
Oh, you don't like it? Okay, you see, I'm a big Dr. Pepper guy. Actually, I'm a Mr. Pibb guy.
Well, to be fair, okay. So here's the thing. So sometimes McDonald's, when they script their soda machine, sometimes it'll be a thing where like you'll get a drink that the taste has either been, I speculate, Dr. Pepper, which I didn't like. It might have been root beer though. So it's either root beer, or Dr. Pepper. I don't
McDonald's does not have root beer.
You sure about that?
I am pretty sure about that. Yes.
You'll find Dr. Pepper then for sure. Then.
McDonald's used to have Mr. Pibb for a long time. Yep. And now the place that I get Mr. Pibb is at the movie theater. The movie theater, my go-to is like medium popcorn, medium Pibb.
Yep. Anyway. And Kurt became a writer in Canada. So
I love that. I love how random that is. But it fits because he really is the one going off to parts unknown. You know what I mean?
He's going off to parts unknown, but also it's the fact he's left a... It depends on how. I don't know. You can look at his glass half full, glass half empty. Like, you know, he kind of left behind the American graffiti in all senses of the word.
Totally, yeah,
Americana. Or is it like, you know, look at him, he left America.
I mean, I gotta tell you, Dragon. Like whenever I picture him in Canada as a writer, I feel like it's a lonely existence for him.
We should ask Laser Dude how lonely he feels.
Oh, come on! I'm saying not as far as like the actual place feels lonely. I'm saying as far as like it is very isolated from all of his friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it didn't say he was married. He's a married.
Right?
writer.
Exactly.
He was a
Yeah.
writer in Canada.
And let's face it, Dragon. The writer lifestyle is a lonely existence, right? Like,
yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like that's like the melancholy ending. But just goddamn Milner, man. Like, did Lucas get us fucking dirty with that?
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it adds such a pathos to the movie, literally at the very last moment.
Oh yeah. It's a shame too. I mean, he was such a nice kid.
Yeah. You know, and the fact that cruising was his thing, and you have to imagine that him being killed by a drunk driver, like him driving, was probably involved, you know? Like, essentially, it was probably a situation of he died doing what he loved, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, goddamn, that whole... Again, I just can't get over the Milner thing. It's just, it slaps me in the face every time.
For sure. Yeah. I think it is a gut punch when it pops up.
Uh-huh.
Any comments we should mention, Tiki?
Yeah, let's see. Richard's Victims is saying, 50th anniversary. Imagine when the first Avengers gets to 50. Dragon, do you think this channel will still be around in 2062? Do you think we'll still be around in 2062?
Well, thanks for bumming it. I don't even know if I'm going to make it next year.
Do you think the human race will still be around in 2062?
I'm just concentrating on making it the next year, Tiki.
I know, right? Okay, and then also Little Blue saying, you can imagine audiences who saw American Graffiti would not expect what would come next. Lucas and George would create Star Wars, and Bob would become a famous archaeologist. Indeed. Okay, well, I think that's about it, Dragon. Any final thoughts on your end?
Final thoughts is, American Graffiti is very, very pivotal, just showing that, okay, this Lucas kid knows how to make a movie and knows how to, tie things together and just kind of say something about a coming-of-age story. And, of course, this led him down a path of great success. And you know what? It's nice seeing the DNA at its core, though. Lucas, again, he could make a mean movie, and it's one that kind of is a movie my father loves. It's a movie that I'm sure he loves, and a movie that basically summarized his own coming of age story practically, kind of embodied in the films. There's a personal aspect of it there for me, I suppose, just in all the trappings and just the feel for 62. I feel that it's just very well captured. So the movie is a time capsule piece in the best sense of the word.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, man, just literally because a big bulk majority of this movie is there's there's the Boulevard again, there's Western again, there's Kentucky Street again. It's hard for me to separate this movie from Petaluma, but I am very impressed with all the things it did as a trailblazer. The non-linear structure and editing, the non-diegetic soundtrack, and how it weaved its way through the film and literally becomes a character in its own right. Slapping you in the face with that, with that text right at the end. I mean, it really is very interesting to me how a movie that was essentially made as a dare to make a light and fluffy teen movie, and a movie that, that is basically the pop culture consensus of this film, is that it's a nice, light and fluffy, little piece of Americana. But I mean, really, the more I watch it, especially as an adult and as I get older, there's a lot of substance under that hood. All right. Pun. See what I did there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, folks. So see y'all later. Dragon, we got a fucking refrigerator full of melting popsicles we need to eat.
Oh, boy.
All right. See y'all later, folks. Have a good one.